Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to The Bunker. It's time for another voicemail. Today's voicemail is from a caller named Charlie. Let's hear what Charlie has to say.
Hello, Lloyd. My name is Charlie. First and foremost, I want to say thank you for the work that you have done and that you continue to do. I know it probably can't be easy, but you keep at it, and it's because of people like you that I'm free today. And that's a gift that I can't ever repay, but I am indebted to you and eternally grateful for that. So thank you so much. Um, I'm contacting you just with kind of a what if question today. Basically, along the lines of family when it comes to shunning. A little bit of backstory when it comes to me is I got disassociated back in the summer of 2018. And it's kind of a long story, but I actually didn't know that it had happened when it happened. Nobody ever contacted me and told me that I was getting disassociated or kicked out. And so it kind of came as a shock when I finally found out, and the way I found out. How it happened was I had been kind of secretive about getting out of the religion, but at one point I decided that I was just needed to be honest with my family. And so I decided to call my mother and just tell her everything, how I was feeling, my plans for the future, everything. So I gave her a call, and she didn't pick up, which was weird because she always picked up for me anytime I called her in the past. About a minute later, I ended up getting a text message from her, and that's how I found out that I had been disassociated. Needless to say, it came as a big shock to me, and I was caught off guard. I didn't know what to make of it. My mother, being very dedicated to the organization, she let me know that her and the rest of my family, the only way that we could have any sort of relationship with each other is if I came back. Well, I called to be honest, and so I told her, I'm not coming back. And I asked if I could call her to say goodbye because I knew what this meant. And she said no. And that hurt. And it hurt for a very long time afterwards. And having a child of my own now, it really drove home the fact of how could you treat your own flesh and blood like that? And for me to disown my own child, I feel like they would have to have committed the most heinous, disgusting, morbid crime ever for me to finally say, you're not my child anymore, and I'm not going to speak to you. And even then, I don't know if I could do it, because we have a bond that's irreplaceable, I feel. Basically, my question to you is this: if your father or somebody else who has been shunning you for a long time came to you and said that they were so sorry and that they were brainwashed and it wasn't of their own accord that they had been shunning you and they wanted to have some sort of relationship with you, could you drop all the hurt and the pain and just go ahead and try to move forward? This is something I've thought about a lot, and I think is possible potentially one day. You know, my mother or another family member could come and say that they want to have a relationship after shunning me. And right now, I don't feel like I'm ready for that. So, seeing as you have gone through the same thing, I was wondering if I could get your input and what you would do and how you would handle it. Who knows, it may or may not happen, but it's something that I think about constantly. And I think you're a better man than I am, and maybe I already know the answer, but I still would appreciate your input if possible. So thank you for listening, and thank you again for everything that you do.
Well, thank you, Charlie, for that incredibly important message, because you're dealing with issues that many people will be able to relate to. I can certainly relate to. You're incredibly generous with your praise of me and this channel, so thank you. But please, whatever happens, don't feel indebted to me. The way I view this job and my activism work is that obviously my aim is to help people wake up where possible. Among other things, that's not my only aim, but a key aim is to present resources that will help people realize that they're being lied to and exploited. Those resources are only useful if someone is at a place in their lives where they're ready to summon the courage and bravery and honesty to challenge sincerely held beliefs. If you're not at that place, then I can make however many thousands of videos, won't make a single difference, will it? So don't consider yourself indebted to me. Well done for making it out and for, again, summoning the courage to see the man behind the curtain with the flailing arms. But onto this particular subject, I think you've been dealt with in a really shitty way, to be honest. I'm sorry, I don't swear often on this channel. What an appalling way to treat someone who's been disassociated, to not even extend the courtesy of letting you know that you've been disassociated, so that you inevitably end up with that situation where you reach out to your mother and she knows you've been disassociated, but you don't. You don't have that knowledge, that important knowledge that's affecting your relationship with your family. So I think that your elders or your former elders are a disgrace. I think they've dealt with you in an incredibly underhanded way. And doesn't this show the nature of the organization? I do sympathize as well, obviously, with the situation with your mother shunning you. I'm obviously in the same situation with my father. He told me in advance that he would shun me. In fact, he went one step further and said, even if you were disfellowshipped unfairly, because I write in my book, at one point in my waking up process, it looked like the elders were out to get me on any pretext. And my dad said at the time, if they disfellowship you, Lloyd, even if it's unfairly, it will kill me to do it, but I will shun you. And so he stayed true to that word. In the end, I wasn't disfellowshipped unfairly or otherwise. I disassociated. I walked away from the religion, and he stayed true to his word. We haven't had meaningful contact since 2013, which is when I disassociated. It's just been the occasional fragments of conversations here or there if there's necessary business that needs to be taken care of. But no, there's been no relationship. Would I welcome him back with open arms if he called me up and said, Lloyd, I've made a terrible mistake. I can't believe I was lied to. Please let me back in your life. Let's start over. Well, it's a little bit complicated. I no longer subscribe to the concept of compulsory forgiveness if someone does something that hurts you, or if someone is abusive towards you or behaves abusively towards you. So I wouldn't feel compelled to forgive my father even if he were to ask for forgiveness. You have to remember that this is a guy who brought me into the world and has allowed his love for an organization to break the paternal bond, so that not just his beliefs are more important, but specifically his role as an elder is more important than having a relationship with myself, with my wife, and with our two children. Because bear in mind, I am faced daily with the reality of the situation, with the fact that you can be a Jehovah's Witness and not shun your family, because I'm living in the same house as Deanna's parents or in the same building, they are very much a part of my life, of our lives as a family, and they are very much involved as grandparents to Jessica and Julia. And yet they're Jehovah's Witnesses. As I've explained before, it's a disfellowshipping offence to go against the disfellowshipping decree. They call it brazen conduct. You can be disfellowshipped if you fail to shun a disfellowshipped non-relative, but it's different if it's a relative. If it's a relative, it's not a disfellowshipping offence. It's just that you're repeatedly guilt-tripped with the propaganda material into considering it to be an act of loyalty, something where you're falling short. But you won't be disfellowshipped for it. Deanna's parents aren't disfellowshipped for their contact with me and her and with our two children. They're just not exemplary, meaning that he can't be an elder or a ministerial servant. Neither of them can be regular pioneers or delegates at international conventions. That's how it works. They have found a way to be Jehovah's Witnesses and let their humanity shine through regardless. So I live every day with a living, breathing reminder, or two living, breathing reminders of how inhumanely my father is treating not just me, but his two grandchildren. And bear in mind, they're not his only grandchildren. He has two others, and he's not shunning them. They're very much part of his life, and they have grown up having him in their lives. But just because Jessica and Julia have committed the crime of being born into an apostate family, they don't get to have any contact with their grandfather. He even at one point had the cheek to suggest that he might come to Croatia and arrange to see them without us being there. In other words, carving up the family to suit him. Like, oh yeah, I'll have a little bit of this part of the family, but I won't have anything to do with this part. No, we come as a package. Thank you. And furthermore, we won't have you normalizing this grotesque, bullying, manipulative playground behavior in front of our two children, if that's okay with you, Dad. And I do try to extend as much of the benefit of the doubt as possible and as much sympathy as possible, because I can remember what it was like to be in the thrall of the governing body. I can remember what it was like to think that disfellowshipping was the right thing to do, that it was a loving thing to shun someone. I've shunned people. It's just that now I am a father, now that I've experienced how overwhelming the paternal bond is, I can never, ever, I can never forgive my father's treatment, not just of me, but of his two grandchildren. The best that we could ever have, if he were to ever realize that he's being lied to and exploited and manipulated, the best that we could have is a situation where there is diplomacy. He is still my relative. He is still the grandfather of my two children. Do I want to deprive them of any knowledge of him, even if he were to apologize, even if he were to turn around and say, I was wrong, I'm sorry? I wouldn't go that far. I would find a way of allowing him to be in our lives, but he would have to understand that what he did and the way he treated us, again, mostly to shield his standing as an elder, what he did was unacceptable, and we don't have to forgive him for it. If he can understand that we don't have to forgive him and shouldn't be expected to forgive him, on that basis, I would find a way of, extending diplomacy and letting the children know who he was. And maybe, to some degree, maybe even having some kind of relationship. I don't even know what it would look like, but I'm open to the possibility of having some kind of relationship with him. But it wouldn't be a relationship where everything's fine and everything's superb and everything's forgiven. And not all relationships need to be like that, by the way. It's okay to calibrate a relationship with someone according to the facts, according to how they've treated you. So I suppose, in short, my answer is it's complicated. Things involving families often are complicated. But the way I feel as a parent, as a father, at the moment, at this point in my life, certainly, is that my father's behavior is inexcusable and I don't have to forgive him for it. And if he is willing to come back into my life with that realization and understanding that, then yes, the door is open. But it's disgraceful, quite frankly. And you have to understand as well that the circumstances were particularly galling. As I've said before, as a father, imagining this situation where there's a rift and I genuinely believe I have the truth, and if my child strays from this one and only truth, they're going to be destroyed or terrible things are going to happen to them, my attitude would be, let's sit down and we're thrashing this out. I know I've got the truth. So we're going to sit down, we're going to have our Bible here, we're going to have whatever material you need to bring to the table. Give me your absolute worst argument, because I know I'm right, I know I have the truth, and it's my job to persuade you of that. That was not my dad's attitude at all. I don't mind saying he was a total coward. He ran for the hills. He ran for the hills rather than trying to defend his beliefs, which, if you think about it, says a lot about how strongly he holds his beliefs if he couldn't even be bothered to defend them in a conversation with his son when he's an elder and he's supposed to be administering counsel and shepherding to others in the congregation, including those who have doubts themselves. But with his own son who has doubts, with his own son who is in danger of straying from the fold, he runs a mile. He bravely runs away to invoke Monty Python and the Holy Grail. No, I don't mind saying this and being held to these words to my dying breath. My father acted in an extremely cowardly way. His behavior was unacceptable. And though I hold the door open for him to have some kind of relationship in the future, whatever that relationship looks like, a relationship based on respect and diplomacy and treating each other in a cordial way, even if that ends up being the case, it will have to be on the basis that he understands that I don't have to forgive him. But if the circumstances had been different, I might feel differently. If, for example, he had tried to salvage me, if he had tried to reason with me, or exerted any effort whatsoever to save me to God's one and only true organization, I might feel differently. But the fact that he could drop his son like a ton of bricks, if he'd put forth any effort to extend the same kind of love and concern and interest in his grandchildren that he has displayed in his other grandchildren, that would also flavour my opinion of him. But we have just multiple layers of failure as a parent. I'll just put it frankly. Multiple layers of failure as a parent. So I don't expect him to ever wake up. I just don't. I don't think he's capable of thinking about these things in an honest and intellectual way. But if he did ever wake up and he did ever express an interest in having some kind of relationship, he'd have to understand that that relationship would now be on my terms. And I don't think I'm unreasonable for taking that position. But we all need to navigate these things, and not every relationship is the same. Not every example of shunning is the same or as egregious as another example of shunning. There's all sorts of different situations that come into play, and ultimately we all need to navigate these things as we see fit. None of this is to say that if you've been shunned by your parent and they come back to you and say, I'm sorry, please can we resume our relationship, that you should respond in the way that I'm describing. I'm all in favour of everyone just figuring it out for themselves. But you asked me specifically, how would you deal with your father? And yeah, that's how I would respond to any overtures he might make. And I don't mind saying that for the record. But that's everything I have for you. Don't forget that if you would like to leave a voicemail, the thing to do is to go on speakpipe.com/Cedars, indicating very clearly if you don't want me to broadcast your message on my YouTube channel. But that's it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lloyd Evans channel for more such videos. And as always, thank you for watching.